Well, welcome to the second panel discussion of the Gulf Capital SME Summit 2021. My name is Richard Thompson. I am the moderator for this panel discussion. And over the next 30 minutes, we're going to look at sustainability and ESG, environmental, social and governance factors, and how that is changing the business landscape and particularly how it affects SMEs. I'm delighted to be joined for this discussion by Dr. Yahya Anouti, who is a partner at management consultant strategy and also joined by Bianca Gracias, who is a partner at the International Consultant Law Office. Thank you, Yahya, and thank you, Bianca, for your time today. Now, for any of you watching who are interested in sustainability issues or have comments to make, I mean, it's such a big issue, such an important issue. You can join the conversation using the comment box on the right-hand side of your screen. Please send in your questions. We've only got half an hour, so get your questions in and your comments, and we'll try and keep the conversation as engaging as possible. Yahya, if I can come to you first. So, sustainability, it's the number one item on the global policy agenda. We've recently learned that the UAE is going to host COP28, the 28th edition of the UN Climate Change Summit in 2023. Egypt, of course, will host COP27 next year. And everyone's talking about ESG factors, environmental, social and governance factors from an investment point of view and a policy point of view. What does all of this mean for small businesses and SMEs in this region, and how should SMEs respond?
Hi, thanks, Richard, for hosting me. I'm pleasure to be here with Bianca over this panel. Let me start from the big picture. If you put yourself in the shoes of an SME and look at what's happening around, think of the following. At the global level, we're going to see new policies coming in, something like a carbon tax on the products that are being shipped and exported and imported around the world. We're going to see a lot of investments at competitive interest rates going towards sustainability related initiatives and sustainability related activities and capital investments. We're going to see a lot of the R&D and innovation related disruptions happening in this field. So this is from a macro view, and all the countries and all the policymakers will be pushing in that direction, as we've seen in COP26, and hopefully 27 and 28 will double down on the momentum. Now, if I look here at our region, we have heard clear and loud commitments around the net zero agenda, whether from the United Arab Emirates by 2050 or Saudi Arabia and others in the region. We have also heard about the Green Saudi initiative and the Green Middle East initiative. We know that the governments are serious about this. We know that they are pushing it through, and we know that this region has, from a macro level, has the competitive advantage to emerge as winners in the sustainability agenda. So this is from a macro view. When thinking of the SMEs, we need to think that our consumers are willing to pay more and are demanding more sustainable products. In a recent survey we carried out for 1,000 people here in the region between the UAE and Saudi Arabia, we found like 60% are willing to pay up to 10% more in the price for more sustainable related products. And this is a major shift in the sensing that we observe in the region. So there is the profit-related opportunity. More so, your talent is asking to join purpose-driven institutions where they are contributing to a grand challenge like the sustainability-related agenda. So thinking of the SME agenda, we have to think of a new purpose that is anchored on sustainability, new products and services, thinking of higher margins, whether from reducing the costs or from these higher margins from selling at higher prices, and thinking of new competitive advantages that you can create given the natural advantages that we have in the region. So this is, in summary, the macro and how would SMEs need to think about this agenda.
Thank you, Yahya. That's so many details within the points that you mentioned. If I can just start on the final point that you were making there, or one of the final points about consumer behavior or consumer demand for greener products. I presume for many SMEs, particularly those involved in manufacturing, they might be involved in somebody's supply chain. Do you think that they will find the companies at the top of the supply chain will be pushing them to be green or to have better decarbonization credentials? So if you're selling into a big government entity or a manufacturer. Is that going to be a significant factor?
Yes, it will be a competitive advantage, to put it in simple terms. And here we have to think of two fronts. There is the first front. I told you about the net zero ambitions of the nations, and this has to cascade down to the SMEs who will contribute to this agenda. And they will be measured on how much emissions they are producing. And like what we have seen in the local content platform, where if you hire more locals, you have a competitive advantage on your competition. The carbon footprint and the greenhouse footprint of your operations will be, again, a competitive advantage. So this is something that we forecast that it will be coming down. And the other aspects that will be coming down into is the exports related products, whether products or services. We see that international off-takers and international companies are bringing in the circular economy concept down in their procurement value chain. They are evaluating the level of circularity of their suppliers. And we believe we have the advantage to win in that game. And you can increase your competitiveness in here to capture more market share, whether locally or at the international level.
Thank you very much. Now, if anyone has questions for Yahya about some of, he's touched on carbon taxes, lower interest rates for green finance, consumer behavior changing, the opportunities for recruitment if you are green. If you have any questions for Yahya on any of that, please use this the text field on the right hand side of your screen. Send in your comments and questions, and we can pick Yahya's brains on these topics. I'd like to bring in Bianca Gracias now. Bianca is a partner at the International Consultant Law Firm. Now, Bianca, perhaps if you could just give me your thoughts on what the sustainability agenda means for small businesses, but also from a legal point of view, does it mean new legislation? Does it mean changing contract terms and conditions? How do you see it panning out?
Thank you very much, Richard. It's a pleasure to be on a panel again with Dr. Yahya and yourself. Sustainability, I think, is something that's quite close to a lot of our hearts, and it's more of a movement than just a business activity, if you will. And I believe very strongly as well that this is the opportunity for SME owners to take initiative and be proactive and be recognized for being leaders in their sector, their business activity on the backs of sustainability. I'm going to go on a bit of a did you know before I start talking about actual legislation. Did you know that His Highness Sheikh Mohammed launched the Green Economy Initiative? How many of us have heard of the Green Economy Initiative, and do you know what this means? Well, this initiative was launched, believe it or not, in 2012, where UAE seeks to become the global hub and a successful model of the new green economy. And under this, and this was meant to pave the way for legislation, for more guidelines to come, to make UAE completely green. And UAE, through this initiative, aims to become one of the world leaders in this area. For me, this would be, say, the main grounds of legislation coming from it. Today, if you look at it, come COP26, 28, of course, it's a huge honor for UAE to be hosting COP28. That being said, I think legislation today, if you will, is more of a nudge, a guideline, and an initiative, and not really something mandatory for the private sector or SME owners. However, it's always a good idea to get a head start. I guess in conclusion, what I want to say is SME owners need to ask themselves today, how sustainable really is their business? Or what initiatives are they taking towards contributing towards sustainability and the initiatives that our country is taking as a whole? And to emphasize what Dr. Yahya just said, I liked what he said. He said it's important to have a competitive advantage, which is soon becoming the need of the hour, rather than just having a natural advantage. An even simpler question, I think, to ask ourselves is, are we even green? Over to you, Richard.
Bianca, thank you very much. I mean, it's quite interesting, I think, the legal questions, because as you mentioned, it seems that this is more a sort of policy direction and guidelines. We haven't, as far as I'm aware, we haven't had specific legislation mandating certain, circular targets or recycling. Do you anticipate that we will have new legislation that will require, certain levels of green building or certain levels of recycling or, certifications, all that can, especially in the UAE with COP28 in a couple of years, do you anticipate legislation?
I not only anticipate the legislation coming in, but I've also seen certain legislation. For example, the Dubai municipality has already released green building guidelines. And we are seeing an increasing number of initiatives coming into the UAE. You may have already seen solar parks being launched, smart cities being launched. So there is guidelines around the initiation of such projects. However, there is no certain legislation where it says that SME owners must have X amount of sustainability controls or protocols within their businesses. But I do see this becoming legislation or protocol, if you will, within larger business organizations or government controlled organizations where, for example, if me as a business owner, I want to go and register myself for a tender, I will need to put into place certain sustainability protocols or policies in order to qualify perhaps for that particular tender.
So we've seen, I mean, on the oil companies, in Saudi Arabia with Aramco and in the UAE with ADNOC, we've seen the in-country value requirements over the past few years. That kind of localization, local content element has increased in their supply chain management structures. Do you think we can expect to see that? This is for Bianca. Expect to see that on the decarbonization side, so that the big government clients, the spenders, will expect their suppliers to have certain levels of sustainability achievement?
I think my answer would be a resounding yes. On our way to COP28, we can see a lot more of the initiatives and guidelines being put into practice and implemented, and the green economy initiative coming into force in a big way. So I think it would be crucial for us as SME owners to start getting a head start, putting into place initiatives, policies that would in the end give us a competitive advantage, if you will.
Okay, thank you. Now, Yahya, I saw you nodding your head there when I was asking that question to Bianca about in-country value. So, do you also think that suppliers should start to prepare for these mandates coming from the government clients?
Yeah, like I see, this is what I see as different about here, our region in the Middle East. Like over the last few years, whether with the ICTIVA or the ICV programs here in the region, the local content related programs, our national champions and government have created these amazing platforms where they can cascade down national priorities into a mechanism that goes to SMEs. And it's not only about the regulations and the bidding process, but they have also made available tools, whether support and investment, whether coaching related aspects, to enable them to reach these local content requirements. And these platforms, and I'm talking about the procurement, the incentive schemes, the investment schemes, etc., all of these can be easily expanded into the ESG agenda, where we add the E aspect related to that very quickly. And they have this platform, and they measure the impact, and you see all these dashboards when you walk around these companies around how much impact this has created. So this is something that can move us very swiftly towards these long-term targets.
And Yahya, you mentioned in your comments about better interest rates for green financing. We've had a question from Mohammed, and I think, Mohammed, I'm not sure if I fully understand your question, but hopefully I do. Mohammed is asking, how can you engage SMEs and support owners for zero financing in the private sector? Now, I think Mohammed might mean net zero financing, but I don't know if that's what he means. But Yahya, do you, this green financing that you're talking about and favorable interest rates, how do companies find out about that?
So we are hearing about some green bonds being issued in the region, and there are talks about some green financing schemes in the region. And from our side, the price of that, we believe that this is something that can happen, and governments and banks should look at that. And we have assessed the price of that. We believe this would enable a macroeconomic value of $2 trillion in the coming 10 years for the region, and could create 1 million jobs. And these are mostly driven within the SMEs ecosystem. So this is something that we start seeing some signals of, whether in Qatar or in the UAE. Even SEC has in Saudi Arabia issued a green sukuk. So there is a movement in there. We will see more of that, and just the price is huge on this. And let me just elaborate here a bit to make it practical for SMEs. You can think of your current cost of operations. Today, moving to towards more renewable energy is lower cost in case you are a big consumer of electricity. If you are using just for simple stuff like packaging, we looked at plastic-based barrels and steel-based barrels for the transport of some of the goods like chemicals. Let's say, since many of the SMEs in the region are there. If we use refurbished material, you are cutting your cost by 50 to 70%. So this is a direct economic price that helps you on the circularity, on the environmental footprint, and so on. And there are new investment opportunities. Imagine the circular economy. It requires a secondary market. So imagine an investment to create the secondary market of supply and demand and create this mediator in the middle and all the opportunities that will come with that. So these are all new investments under the green agenda that will create jobs and create impact and create business for SMEs.
Okay, thank you. Now, Mohammed, I hope I asked your question properly. If we haven't answered it, please can you sort of clarify, and we'll try and get to it. And I can also see a comment from Essam, who says, we're asking the questions, but no one is taking them to the guests. So hopefully, Essam, I've done that. And if you have a question, please send it in. I will put it to Yahya and Bianca, and we will try and get you all involved in the conversation. So please do feel free to send in your comments and questions. Now, Bianca, you and Yahya, you've set out the case for why sustainability is important. You know, it's coming from the top. It's part of a policy direction. There are changing customer expectations, and in terms of recruitment, people want to work for ethical and green companies. So the case is clear. Bianca, how do I start? You know, from a business point of view, how do I start to make my business more ESG friendly?
That's a very interesting question. That's such a big question, right? So many questions within it. I think the most important question that we need to ask ourselves is, what are our business policies and practices? Where do our practices start? Like whether we have contracts in place for all the relationships we have, how do we deal with our employees? How do we recycle waste in the business? And do we need to create a policy for every process that we have in place? Once we start creating the policies and procedures, I think this automatically flows into any contracts we may have, any other relationships we may have with external service providers. And we can also take a leaf out of the books of ADX, for example. They have a whole ESG policy in place. If we just log onto their website and have a look at their policy and procedure.
Sorry, which website is that?
ADX or ADIO.
Okay.
They have.
That's the Abu Dhabi Investment Office.
Yeah. So if you have a look at it, ADX has set out, for example, ESG disclosure guidelines, right, to aid the path of any listed companies and issuers of sustainable reporting, etc. So it's a good idea to take a leaf out of the books of these bigger companies to see what we can do for our smaller companies in terms of process, policy, making ourselves more accountable.
And Bianca, I don't know if this is a legal question that you're able to answer, but in the past I've heard about when companies make claims about their food product, particularly if you're exporting into Saudi Arabia, or some countries have quite strict regulations about what you can claim. Their Food and Drugs Administration will say if you claim your bags of tea are particularly energizing, you have to justify those claims. Do you anticipate, if companies make claims about their carbon footprint or about their sustainability credentials, will they have to go through some sort of certification process, or will there be some sort of authority that will regulate those claims? Or does that exist today?
I don't believe it exists today. Dr. Yahya, you can correct my understanding, at least the UAE. I'm not aware of it. I may be wrong. But I do see the UAE being well on its way to develop regulation in that respect. Yeah. Definitely the municipality, Dubai municipality, Abu Dhabi municipality, I know for sure are gearing up in view of COP28 to tighten up regulations in this respect.
Because I could claim that I've got zero carbon footprint, and who's going to check? So there must be some. If we've got national targets, there must be some national regulations or enforcement. Yahya, do you know about what's in place for that sort of thing?
Yeah, so globally there are these green certificates. There are different types of certificates, and some of them, if we're talking only about the emissions green on the circularity, there are other related aspects, and we have to look at the announcement of PIF, who announced about creating a regional carbon market, a voluntary carbon market. So it's about really the market dynamics. It's not something that you have to cascade down in the regulations. You have to create the markets where for one of the players, it's much cheaper to change his internal processes and to make them less emissions. For the other player, it might be better to offset through purchase of carbon credits that some other player, or through using biodiversity, nature-based related solution. So these market dynamics will come into region over the coming years.
I mean, I suppose it's not just about government enforcement or regulation. If I want to borrow, if I want to access green funds that have more lower interest rates or cheaper source of capital, I guess I have to prove to the bank or whoever the lender is that I have these certificates. So these green certificates that you're talking about, these are sort of internationally recognized, but there's nothing specific in this region.
They are applied internationally. We need to create the bodies in the region in order to adopt these. And what's very important in this transition is the transparency in the process, the transparency and the inclusiveness in this process, to make sure that the SMEs and especially the micro players are sort of included in this transition and are empowered in a transparent manner within this transition.
And I'm also interested, Yahya, you mentioned in your opening comments that you had conducted a survey about, sort of changing views, and you mentioned recruitment. What sort of sentiment did you hear there? I mean, is this Generation Z, young people who don't want to work for the bad old industries? They want to save the planet, and I don't mean that in a pejorative way at all. Is that what the survey says? It's a generational thing, or is this everybody is now switching over?
Yeah, I don't have the scientific evidence for the generation. I can just relay some of the aspects that came out of the survey. So what we found is that people, younger generations from those surveyed, are looking more to join purpose-driven entities, and we see that from discussions and some boards I'm engaged in the US, that some of the young graduates are leaving jobs, high-paid jobs, to go join purpose-driven entities within, and many of them under the sustainability agenda. So we are seeing that. We are seeing like the principles of ESG under the labor-related aspects are very important for the young talent, and some of them not only for the young. So we are seeing way more awareness on what they want, and we need the SMEs and the employers to shift their direction and to shift their priorities to make sure that we always continue to grab the best talents in the market, and we groom them and we give them the sense of purpose that, as I said, very important, it is part of a competitive advantage in the years to come.
Yeah. So it's a competitive advantage in terms of selling because the consumer wants it, but also in terms of recruitment. I'm interested that you said that people say in your survey they're willing to pay 10% more for products that are more sustainable. Do you think that's true? I mean, people say these things in a survey, but when you're in the supermarket and you see, I don't know, some, organic vegetable and it's 10% more, do people in reality go for the organic vegetable? Do you think people say one thing in a survey and then it pans out differently in real life?
And not really. We looked at the data and we see that you have a market today for bioproducts. It exists here in the region, and end of the day, it's not that everybody told us I'm willing to pay more, and we looked at who's willing to pay more, 5%, 10%, and so on. But if I look at what's happening at the international level today, and some years ago, if you live in the US, you can get your electricity plant to be net zero or more renewable energy driven, and you had willingness to pay more. So it's something you choose, and this is where they have been using a lot of the behavioral insights in order to nudge people to become more to gear them towards the net zero schemes. We see that airlines in Europe and in the US are talking about charging higher to offset. It's an optional thing to offset. So just creating the option is a minimal cost. If I am an SME and I have the opportunity to create the option at a very low cost, this is something that would create a much higher margin.
Okay, thank you. Now we have just about 5 minutes remaining on this discussion. If you wish to get involved, please use the screen on the tab on the right-hand side of your screen to send in your comments and questions. We'd love to hear from you. It's a very important topic. So any comments, any questions, send them in. We've just got 4 or 5 minutes remaining. Bianca, if I can come to you now, I just want to broaden my question to you a little bit. So you work for, you're a partner at the International Consultant Law Office. So you provide, you deal with clients, a lot of SME clients. What are the issues? And this might not relate to sustainability, but what sort of things are companies coming to you with at the moment? And, after 2 years of COVID and all of the challenges, what are the trends you're seeing?
Well, one of the very interesting trends we are seeing is companies coming to us to assist them with drafting policies that would aid them in their business integrity. For example, corporate governance, anti-money laundering, anti-corruption, whistleblowing, sanctions. These are all policies that they want to see drafted and put into place. We're also having requests come in very regularly for policies to be drafted around employee welfare and well-being, wherein the employers want to be seen as being very strong employers with business integrity in place.
So these are the drafting policies that appear in contracts of employment or in the articles of association, or where are people using these documents?
Within the framework of their business. For example, if they give out any employee contracts, they would refer to their policy handbook, their employee policy handbook, and these regulations would be part of the policy handbook, for example. Or if they were to make in any way, then they would attach all these governance policies. So business integrity is something that we are seeing more light being shed on this particular area.
That's very interesting. So that sort of increased concern about good governance, I mean, that must absolutely play into this sustainability conversation, because that's now part of the good governance sort of calculus, isn't it?
Absolutely. And we've seen tighter regulations come in regarding anti-corruption, anti-money laundering. And this is actually paving the way to having stronger governance being put into place and falling right into the path of ESG. And as Dr. Yahya said, the time is now. It's going to be cheaper now to put into place all these initiatives, which then when the regulation comes out, it's much cheaper to comply.
Better to get in first before you sort of have to react to something. And just briefly, have you seen the same patterns that Dr. Yahya mentioned about recruitment? People when they're looking for new jobs, they're looking for companies that have good governance and that have good sustainability credentials.
We are seeing that come in as well, because we know that because a lot of our clients are asking us to make amendments to their form of employment contracts to put into place what makes their business better than other businesses in terms of government and how better of a place it is to work in. And in doing so, they also write down what their policy is in terms of employee welfare, employee healthcare. So we are seeing that trend coming in, definitely.
Just quickly, Yahya, we've got a question that's coming from Mohammed, a different Mohammed this time. Do you agree with Mohammed that the education plays an important role in raising awareness of sustainability? So, Yahya, education, how important is it, and how do we get the word out there?
It is the key for any change we want to lead in the region, and there is the general public education that is happening, like just hosting the coming 2 COPs in our region, in the Middle East region, is a big testament that we are committed to this, and all the campaigns that will come around it will raise the general public awareness for that. But there has to be more done on this front. But the other more important thing is educating the upcoming generation and the next talent intake for our businesses. And this is about changing stuff that has been already done at the education level, the K-12 level. But also we need to prepare our university students, review the university program. If I do a quick scan on the environmental sciences and on the capabilities that we have here in the region, there is still more work to be done. here, and not do it the retro way from the old curriculum. We need to inject the artificial intelligence related components and all the new things with environmental sciences to prepare this next generation of talent.
Well, fantastic. I'm afraid that brings us to the end of our half an hour. Thank you, Dr. Yahya, Anouti, and Bianca, Gracias, for your time and your insights. Thank you to you, the audience, for watching and for your questions. Hopefully see you all soon, and good luck out there, and see you in the next panel. Thank you.
Thank you.